Welcome to Divine Downloads. I'm your host, Cassandra, and this is the show where we help you divinely design your life. And today's episode is something that I think so many of us need. Whether you're a mom or you're just someone that cares for a lot of people in your work or with your job, it's so hard sometimes to come up with a solid game for self-care and not feel selfish and find practices that genuinely fill up your cup and give you that replenishment you're looking for. And today's guest, Chrissy Kohut, is not only a self-care specialist, she owns her own yoga studio where she teaches a lot of classes to both moms and women and kids about how to fill up their own cup. But she is the author of the new book, What About Me? How to Find Self-Love Through Self-Care. And I am very honored to say that she has been a coaching client of mine for many years now. She kicked it off in our Practical Magic group coaching program. She's done my Spread Your Light Mastermind. And while working together one-on-one, we have worked through the opening up of her very own studio space, as well as the writing of this recently published book that I am just so excited for all of you to get your hands on. I can't wait for you to meet Chrissy. I know you're going to love her just as much as I do. So without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Chrissy, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I have known Chrissy for many, many years now through so many different programs and one-on-one coaching, one-on-one coaching, and I've really watched her throughout just such a beautiful evolution of being a full-time, amazing teacher. But to now coming to this place where she's literally, doing this podcast in her own studio, which is so exciting that she just opened last year. She has a new book coming out and she's just made this, huge shift and gone for what she feels called for. And one of the things that I love that Chrissy talks about is this concept that she created called me-ish, which is really, correct me and share what you think, but it's really honoring self-care and honoring the things that we need for ourselves in a way that's not selfish.
Yes. Yeah. It's loving yourself as much as you do everybody else every single day. Instead of just giving all your attention to everybody, you're giving yourself attention as well. Because you can't fill somebody else's cup if your cup's not full too.
And how did you get specifically called to share about that topic of all the things that you could talk about? Why did that pull at your heart the most?
Funny. It actually came to me in the first course with you, Practical Magic. So we're going back, 2018? Was that 2018, yep. I think?
2018.
Yeah, 2018. So I'd always been, into self-care and, preaching, so to say, self-care to everybody, and how important it is that you have to make time for yourself every single day. And I remember in the course, you gave us an assignment, which was if you could go back and tell your younger version one thing that would help you live your authentic life now, live your best life now, what would that one thing be? And I was like, that's a very loaded question.
It is.
It was. I was like, I can't come up with just one thing. So I sat in meditation like I always do if I need focus, need to figure something out. And I kept hearing the word me-ish. And I was like, that's not even a word. What does that even mean? And the more I stopped resisting, I was like, okay, explain to me. Somebody explain this to me. And I kept hearing I never took time for myself. I never made time, especially daily, to take care of myself. I am by nature I'm a nurturer. I'm a teacher and a nurturer. That's who I am. And I'm always pouring into everybody else. I'm a people pleaser, so I was a young mom. I had 3 kids young. By the time I was 26, I had 3 kids. I had a husband, I had a house. I have a very large family in that I have a lot of cousins. So I was always giving, 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 and never taking the time for myself. And I felt that overwhelm and that burnout and that feeling stressed, especially as the kids got older. And then I, was looking around like, okay, well, they don't need me as much right now. And like, what am I supposed to be doing with myself? And I don't like to use the word lost, but I was confused, right? And it was because I just never took time for myself to even sit down and even like think of one thing that I might want or need for that day to fill up my cup. So that's why Mish came about. And it's kind of, you would think that's a play off of the word selfish, but it's really, it's not. It's because selfish people are selfish. Like they don't think about anybody else. But when you're Mish, you are taking care of all your responsibilities, whatever it is that you have to do, but you're also taking care of yourself as much as a responsibility every single day.
I love that. And I love like talk about definition of like divine download, right? Just like
exactly.
Sometimes it's just a word that doesn't exist, but you need that word that doesn't exist because there's just nothing in the vocabulary that really
exactly
encapsulates what you mean.
Exactly.
So what, I know you work with moms a lot because this is something that plagues a lot of moms, but
yes,
I, as someone that's just becoming a mom and hasn't been a mom or whatnot up until this point, also just feel like so much of your teachings and what you share, and having kind of read through your book already and like worked with you on that, so I know all of it.
Yes, thank you so much for that.
It's really, something that like any woman with a lot on her plate could utilize and incorporate. So was there a point in your journey where you started, maybe even before you coined the term me-ish, but when you started saying like, oh wow, I am giving everything to everyone else, and how did you turn that corner? What was that for you that helped you kind of like get in that path of finding that time for yourself?
It started way too late in life for me. I wish I would have started earlier. And this is why I like to talk to kids and college students and explain to them that this is something you have to start at a young age. So it probably hit me probably in my late 30s, early 40s. And I was on this path of like finding where I can encompass all the things for myself. So I was pulling at spirituality, and I was pulling at like the physical self, like, working out, pulling into like nutrition, all the things. And it was kind of like spiraling. And it was in 2019 when I actually realized what I had encompassed in my self-care practice was what I teach now in my workshops. And what I call it, what about me? Like, when is it my turn? Like, when am I going to take care of myself? And I started to realize like, oh, during every day, I'm filling up my cup in like 5 different areas of self: my physical, my social, my emotional, my intellectual, and my spiritual self. And I'm doing little things that are just lighting me up and making me feel like a better person. So then I was a better mom. I was a better wife. I was a better teacher at the time I was teaching kindergarten. I was walking around this earth like in a much happier, positive way. And 2019 was probably one of the worst times of my life in a sense of things that were going on. My mom her health was failing. My dad, had health issues as well. I had been diagnosed with a blood disorder. My husband had a heart attack a couple years before. And it was in 2019 when I finally realized, I was like, this is an actual thing. And if I keep on with this trajectory, if I keep practicing these practices, it's going to help me live a much healthier and happier lifestyle. And it absolutely has. Who would have thought in 2020 we'd get hit with a pandemic? And if it was not for those practices, I don't think that I would be sitting here right now with you talking the way that I'm talking and being able to make an impact in other people's lives by sharing the things that things like you have taught me, other teachers have taught me that I've gathered and been able to create. And I like, that's why I wrote the book. Like, I want everyone to know and understand that if you can do this every single day, it is possible to live a healthy and happy lifestyle. It's 100% possible. It's not going to be perfect every day, but it can be a lot better.
And I love that you talk about how this came on and you started really like instituting this during a time in your life that was chaos, right? That was a lot of stress, a lot of demands, a lot of different things emotionally, physically that you had to show up for. And I think, for anyone listening, that one of the things I like about kind of like having like me-ish and like self-care as like two different words is that I think sometimes like in those times in life when we feel like we're juggling like 7 different plates, when we feel like we have loved ones we have to take care of, or we have our own health crisis, or maybe we have a boss breathing down our neck, or a company that's about to go under, or these like really like high stress things, it's often the time when we say, I don't have time. Right. I can't do this. This is not the time for me to figure out how to support, whatever. Right. and yet, I can also relate, because during the hardest, one of the first hardest times, you want to call an earlier hardest time of my life, was when I started my spiritual practice, was when I started, eating healthy and doing that, because I do think that there often is something simultaneously like in our soul that calls us to be like, no, like if you want to show up for this, if you want to show up for this in the way that you're going to look back at and be proud of how you showed up, then you're going to have to find the time for this. So how do you start someone off if someone, finds you, comes into your studio, or maybe finds you, online and says, hey, Chrissy, like I'm really relating to a lot of the stuff you're talking about, but listen, I have 2 little kids and I just launched a business and my husband travels and da-da-da-da. Right?
I understand that life.
How do I start this journey, and what does that look like in like practical steps?
Yeah, in practical steps, it's one tiny little step. It's just like, if you think back to like New Year's resolutions, everybody goes so gung-ho. They take on this big thing, either whether it's a workout program or it's a diet, which I don't like the word diet, but it's they go head first and they last maybe 2 to 3 weeks, maybe, and then they fall off because they're biting off more than they can chew. So what I teach people in my workshops, in my retreats, and in my online coaching is that you start little. You find one area. What is the one area that you need the most help in? And then you start there. Maybe it's you need to move your body a little bit more. Maybe it's you need a little more gratitude in your day for your spiritual practice. Maybe emotionally you're just all over the place. Maybe you need a therapist. Maybe you need to journal. You're finding one thing that you need to really lock in, and you work on that thing for 21 days. And then once that's locked in, and if you're feeling good about it, you add something else to it. And then you gradually build and build and build. What I did, this self-care practice, this took me years to do. I mean, I literally started, I would probably say when I was 19, I'm 52 now. It started with a health journey. I was very sick for many years. Then it went into, more about the physical part, in the sense of I had 3 kids. So I was trying to like get in shape. And then people were dying around me and people were sick all the time. So I was in that spiritual space. I went back to school late in life. So I was in that intellectual space, and then the emotional part of dealing with, my mom's illnesses, my own illness, my husband having a heart attack. I've got 3 kids at home. What do I do? Like, God forbid something does happen to him. And it was just all encompassing, building and building and building. I just started building. And I actually, A Healthy and Happy You, that's the name of my business. So that actually started as a little Facebook group. I had a lot of friends that were asking me things that I was doing in life. And I was like, let me just make a little group and I'll just like put in things that I was doing. Like, this is my little spiritual practice here. This is what little workout I'm doing today. These, like, I'm doing the green, celery juice this month, just putting things out there just to share. Cause I feel like when you share things, share your story, somebody might hear something and pick up on it. And maybe you don't do it exactly the way I did it. Maybe you put a little twist on it. But when we share all that information and trying to help somebody live a healthier and happier life, it's just, it's the pay it forward. What I've gotten from you, I'm giving to other people. What I've gotten from other mentors, teachers, I paid to other people. So it started off little by that, and then growing and growing and growing. But the main reason why I self-care, and I didn't realize it until I stood at my mother's deathbed, is that you need to love yourself. Because if you don't love yourself, you're going to be like her at 69 with renal kidney failure, laying in a hospice center because she didn't love herself and she didn't take care of herself. Yeah. And not only what it did to her, but what it did to myself, what it did to my sister, what it did to her family members, her friends, to watch her in that state, because she didn't love herself enough to take care of herself. She was so busy taking care of everybody else. Everybody else was always taken care of, but she wasn't. And that's the fire in me. Like, I always think, on the days, because you know what it's like in running a business, and you're like, why am I doing this? Or some days you're just like overwhelmed, and I'm like, no. And I'll hear the whisper from my mom, you need to help them. You need to help them, because I didn't help myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, as someone that's watched you do both the like deep healing work of, really looking at the wounds and facing the fears,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at, family and all different kinds of things that we work through to help us love ourselves more. I think, what you bring up, and especially when we're thinking about like our parents' generation, but
Mm-hmm.
also for us, right, is that I've always been a believer in, like, all of my years of coaching, that actually taking these like little daily actions in the energy of self-love, in
Mm-hmm.
the energy of self-worth, helps us build that concrete, and I think a lot of times when people hear about like, you have to love yourself, right, they automatically think, well, I don't know, I need to like do deep therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
To love myself. I need to go on an ayahuasca retreat. I need to have
Right.
someone rewire my brain, right? Like, it feels like a mountain to climb to love theirself. And, while I am a big fan of therapy and all of the deeper healing modalities as well, I think there's so much magic in these day-to-day practices,
Mm-hmm.
because our actions are constantly speaking back to our awareness,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's like, when we've talked about before, like quantum embodiment and different things, right? Just having those little moments where you're like, maybe it's like you take it, in the morning, you make like your coffee just how you like it, and you sit out on the deck and you put on your favorite podcast. Maybe you just put on your favorite podcast, or you put in an audiobook you like, or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And you give yourself like 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, before the kids get up, or before your husband does something, or before you have to be stewing anywhere, right? It's like doing that every day. It's not just about like giving yourself those like 15 minutes of joy or pleasure or whatnot, although that's great. But by you doing that every day, you're also reprogramming your subconscious
Mm-hmm.
to tell yourself, I am worthy of this joy.
Mm-hmm.
I am worthy of this moment. I am worthy of making my coffee in just the right way, and like enjoying my morning the way I like to enjoy my morning, or however, anyone wants to enjoy their morning. And those little things, they really add up, right?
They do.
It really shifts how you think about yourself, so that all of a sudden, because you've been actually taking these little actions in the vein of loving yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you do love yourself more, and
Mm-hmm.
you do feel worthy.
And oftentimes, I would venture to say almost all of the time, we have to take those actions before we feel it. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
So you mentioned that there's like kind of you have all these different categories, right? Of like the ways you can kind of fill your cup, your spiritual, your, physical well-being, your intellectual well-being. Can you kind of bring us through some of those and then help us decide, like, are there ones that you feel like are like quote unquote better to start out with, or do you think people should just pick whichever one to start that they feel more like drawn to or attracted to?
Yeah, definitely drawn to, attracted to. You know what you need best than anybody else does. If you feel physically ill all the time, and I'm not talking about like weight or, being fit. I'm talking about like you can't get off the couch because you feel like crap. You know what I mean? Like those kind of days. Um, you need to move your body. You need to lean that way. If you are somebody who feels like the world's against them all the time and you feel like you have no journey towards anything, you need some spiritual self-care. You need a gratitude list, if you're constantly reeling in the head with, negative thoughts and you're having anxiety and panic attacks, you need some emotional self-care. If you are somebody who is
And what
bored
does,
all,
just for,
oh, sorry.
in case anyone's asking, what would you consider emotional self-care?
Emotional self-care would be, well, it depends. It depends on how deep your emotional issues are. If you're having panic attacks, if you're having anxiety attacks, if you're feeling depressed, you need outside help. You need to talk to a physician or a doctor. But if you're emotionally just feeling a little bit blue, or you feel like you're a little bit lost in life, you don't know where you're headed to, you can just easily journal every single day, 3 pages, just get it all out. And eventually you'll start to see a trajectory of where you're going to, or you do a thought log and very,
I
thank you
love
for
my
that one,
thought
Cass.
log.
Yeah,
I love
the
my
thought
thought log.
log, morning, afternoon, evening, just sit down for 60 seconds and write down everything you're thinking, and then go back after a couple of days or a week and track all the negative thoughts that you're having. And where your negative thoughts are is where you're going to lead in life, right? So that's where I would go with the emotional self-care. And then we have the movement for physical, and then social self-care. So are you around toxic people? Like, who are you encompassing your life around? Are they negative Nellies all the time? Are they Debbie Downers? Do you need to remove yourself from them for a little bit? And I talk a lot about boundaries when it comes to self-care, because we have to make sure that we are protecting ourselves emotionally, intellectually, physically, in all ways. But if you're around people that are pulling you down, and I get it, sometimes there are people that you have to be around. There's certain family members you're going to see, you have coworkers, but you can build a boundary. You do not have to engage all the time with people that are just not socially good for you. So you have to have that social self-care. So it's physical self-care, social self-care, emotional self-care, spiritual self-care, and intellectual self-care. And I know that sounds like it's a lot. And when I talk about it in my workshops, I get the eye roll. They're like, I don't have time to pee. You're letting, how am I supposed to incorporate 5 areas of myself, right? But it's, again, little baby steps. And you lean into, what is it that you feel most called to? What is it in your life that you would like to start feeling healthier and happier in? And then you start there with a little habit, little ritual every single day. Because I tell people too, self-care, it's not self-care Sundays, although that's great. If you want to have a whole day on Sunday of self-care, that's lovely. Or once in a while, Wednesdays. It has to happen every
like
single
that.
day. Once in a while, Wednesday, I'm going to take care of myself. But, every single day, you have to do little things to fill up your cup. And depending on what season of life you're in, you'll be able to really embellish on what you're doing. And then other times you're going to have to tailor it down. You're going to have a baby. You're going to have very minimal time to take care of yourself because you're keeping a little tiny human alive. But you will be able to practice self-care in those ways, even if it's for 1 minute, just 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. And if there's any advice that I can give you as a mother to a mother, it's that if somebody offers you help, freaking take it. Take it. Just don't feel the mom guilt. Don't feel like you should be doing it all, because you can't do it all, even though you want to. You need to allow people to help you. One thing during COVID that I would say that I enjoyed, if you could say there's anything about a pandemic, is that I enjoyed something, is that my husband and I were locked down in the house and had to have conversation with each other because it was me, him, and our youngest daughter, right? So we had a lot of conversations about raising our kids. And one of the conversations that came up was that when they were younger, I did it all. Like, I did it all. And if you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, he didn't do shit. Like, I had to do it all. But now that I've done the work and I'm self-aware, I was like, no, I didn't allow him to do anything. Even if I asked him if he wasn't doing it my way, which I thought was the right way, or because I'm such a, energetic person, I would feel his anxiety because he didn't know what he was doing. I would run in and I would save him. Right. So I wasn't really saving him. Like, I didn't know what I was doing either. So I don't understand. Anyway. You know what I'm saying, right? Like, I was
know, and
I didn't know.
This is, and I mean, I feel this way in my business, right? This is, I think, something that I talk to so many women about, that it's interesting because I've always kind of categorized it as like receiving, right? But it really does. It's like hand in hand with self-care and taking care of yourself, where, I've seen that even in my pregnancy journey, I've been like kind of onboarding different people to help me with certain things, so lighten my load. And it has been such a practice to not be like, just go away because I can do it better. right? Like, you're not doing it how I want to do it, or it's not perfect. And, it's, for me, I think, who knows what will happen, like, once I have a baby, but like, my husband is actually very much like that in our house. Like, my mother-in-law thinks it's like hilarious because my husband does the laundry, does the dishes, does the floors, does all of this. And she's like, what did you do? Like, I was like, I didn't have to do anything because he is so uncomfortable with trusting me. Like, he has his own little method. And he's like, Cass is not going to do my method the way I do my method. Nobody
can relate to him.
So I just like let him do it, and sometimes it's funny because I'm on, in that regard, I'm on the other end of it sometimes, where he'll literally be, I am there and I'll have maybe like a spacious morning before my first client, and he'll be rushing off to surgery and like unloading the dishwasher and like cleaning the counters. And I'm like, what are you doing? Just leave. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
I can do it. Like, I'll make my coffee, I'll unload the dishwasher. It's really not a big deal,
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you can't because you don't know how to do. And I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to let you do you. But well,
I think in his line of work too, like, that's how his brain works. It's got to be this way, in line, in order, for him to be able to do what it is that he does.
Absolutely. And I think we all have those like little, I think as women, we especially, obviously like my husband, because I think because of what he does, being like a surgeon and having like such high stakes for his career, he's used to having like, what he often tells me is that like in the OR, if anything goes wrong, even if it's totally not him, even if it's like a tech gives the wrong, puts the wrong thing, or the anesthesia person does the wrong thing, like everything is his responsibility at the end of the day. Like, it all falls on him. And he sometimes takes that home, I think, a little bit. I'm like, who's gonna come get you? The dishwasher, please? But hey, I'll take it. I have it lightens my load. But it's interesting to see that reflection and see how oftentimes it really usually falls on us women.
Yes.
And it's something that both as mothers, as business owners, can really be like a self-sabotage mechanism.
Yes.
Where, yes, of course, probably no one is going to be as good as you with your child, right?
Exactly.
But, if your friend is willing to come over and, actually one of my close girlfriends just had a little one and she has 2 other kids, right? And she's just like such a, what can I say, like holistic, well-read, like always trying to do the best for her kids kind of mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she was just really suffering because of like lack of sleep with the newborn and taking care of the 2 and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally just told her, I was like, I know I'm not a mom, so I have no like I really don't have any experience in saying this, but I was like, I just want to give you permission if you need it. Like if one of your friends wants to just come over and like put on like a cartoon with the boys, like
and sit with them.
Like I know you don't like to do screen time and it's not like you doing your like Montessori games or whatever with them, right? But like give yourself grace for this season.
Yes.
Because what they need most is like a mom that's healthy.
Right.
And
you can't be
has slept.
Exactly. And that's the thing. If you're not doing the things, if you're not filling up your cup, you are going to be burnout and you're going to be stressed. And so you have to take the help. And you have to understand too that it's not going to be perfect. I'd like to like share a story about the dishwasher with you. So I have a student who she'll regularly come in and she'll just like kind of, vomit like, my family. And she'll say to me often, they didn't do this and they didn't do that and they didn't do this. And I'll ask her, well, did you ask them to do it? And a lot of times she'll tell me no. And I'll say, well, why do you assume that they think that they need to do that? She's like, well, who wants piles of dishes in their sink all the time? I'm like, they don't care. Even your husband, that does not bother him. It bothers you, but it doesn't bother them. So you need to have a conversation with them and tell them like, listen, I'd be a lot happier if you could at least put the dishes in the dishwasher. You don't have to run it or maybe clean it out for me. You have to have that communication and that dialogue with one another because they don't know what you're thinking. You don't know what they're thinking. So you have to express it. You have to 100% tell them what it is that you want and you need. And you start from the beginning because you'll wind up like how I wasn't expressing my wants and my needs. And then I would explode. I was like that tornado that would just like come in and just like, what's going on? And then they're all looking at me like, a lunatic, thinking, I'm off my rocker, but it builds and it builds and builds. So you have to have those conversations 100%.
I think those conversations are so important in like this whole journey as far as like when you're looking at, hey, I just listened to this podcast. I want to start incorporating these, a couple little habits to start filling my cup. If you have a partner or a friend or someone, a colleague, a family member, someone like people that like you see on a regular basis, kind of like what you, I think intuitively did with your Facebook group, right? Sometimes we think like, well, I don't need to broadcast this if I don't consider myself a teacher, if I'm not trying to coach on this, like I don't really know anything about, I'm just trying this new thing. Right. But actually the communication of it, a lot of clients that I've had, over the years when they're starting their spiritual practice, which is something that I like is one of my first things I make everyone do is find like some time for that connection. I'm always like, tell your husband, tell your roommate.
Yes.
If you're going home for the holidays, tell your parents or your family or whoever you're staying with for the holidays, hey, just a little heads up. I wake up usually around this time and my first, 15 minutes, I'm going to be doing a meditation, and then I'll be downstairs. So if you hear me kind of moving in my room, but I haven't come out, I'm probably just doing my meditation or getting ready to do my meditation. I mean, even communicating to the point where like I communicate to my parents at one point of like, this is my process. I like to, when I wake up, I'm going to come down. I'm going to make myself some coffee, and I'm going to probably use the restroom. I'm going to wash my face, but I'm not available quite yet.
Yes.
Conversation, right? Like obviously good morning and stuff, right? But like, I'm going to go back upstairs before I have breakfast, and I'm going to spend probably a half an hour to do my, my meditation and my thing. And then I'll come down. And after that second come down, that's when we can have breakfast and chit chat. Right. And it sounds like, oh my God. Right.
But you know yourself enough to know you're not going to have a genuine interaction with them until then.
But it's a blessing for all parties, right? It's a blessing for all parties because on one hand, you've communicated to them. So you've also like kind of unconsciously enrolled them in your habit, right?
Right.
So now like they know they're going to support it, right? They're going to see you making your coffee and be like, enjoy your meditation. Maybe I'll start making waffles for when you're done or whatever it is, right?
Exactly.
Same thing. If you talk to your partner or your roommate or whoever it is, maybe that you deal with, right? And say, hey, honey, just so you know, I'm starting this new thing to try to fill my cup up. And in the morning, I'm going to go for a run for 30 minutes or whatever it is. Whatever your thing is that you want to do. I'm going to go on the porch and read my book. Like, whatever it is. Like, if you let them know, then they actually, like, pretty effortlessly become an accountability party for you, right?
Exactly.
And then more than likely, I mean, I would say 99% of the time, you're not going to get pushback. Right?
No.
And if you happen to get pushback because of a logistical thing, like, let's say your partner goes, okay, well, you're going to walk the dog like before or after? Or do you need me to walk the dog? Like, right?
Right.
Great. Sort it out. Right?
Exactly.
Like, then you can come up with a game plan. Then you can, and it's like in those moments, I think when we have that communication, I think you're right. I think a lot of us as women, we go into like unconscious superwoman mode and just like, I can do it all and I'll figure it out and I don't need no one's help. And just by communicating and asking for little things, letting people know, hey, I mean, I think that's one of the things vice versa. I always think of like the flip side too. Like, how would you feel if this other person you were in relationship with, was not telling you this thing that they really wanted for their piece, right? You'd want them to just tell you.
Yeah. And even if you're afraid they're going to take it in a way where they don't understand, like, I'm a Reiki practitioner and my husband does not get it, doesn't understand it. I don't expect him to understand it. He supports it. But, I'll say I'm going to go upstairs. I have a Reiki, distance Reiki session. I'll be down in a couple minutes. He'll be like, okay, still not getting, but he allows that space for that. Because you're not always going to agree on things, but sometimes when you do the things, like, for example, when I was on the physical journey and the eating healthy and the moving my body, my girls are healthy eaters. They move their bodies. And now my husband, since we were locked down in the pandemic and, he saw me doing things, he's now on a healthier journey as well, because you model it and eventually they'll just start coming around and doing the same thing as you. And you don't have to shove it down their throats. That's another thing. If you are practicing self-care and you're doing something for yourself, share it with everybody. Tell them what you're doing, but don't expect them to come along for the ride, because they might not be there in that part of their journey, or they may never be in that part of their journey where they want to do the same things that you're doing. So don't feel slighted because maybe you offer to a friend or you offer to your spouse, hey, do you want to do this with me? And they don't want to do it. That's fine. That's their journey, because this is your journey. And that's why I say it's your self-care practice. It's what you need to fill up your cup, not what everybody else needs. Because what Cass needs today isn't the same thing that Chrissy needs today. I do think that you should fill something up in all 5 areas, but it does not need to be the same thing. And it does not need to be the same amount of time either. Because like when I was a teacher, I taught kindergarten and first grade, primarily kindergarten. So during the summer, I hadn't, all the time in the world because I was fortunate to be one of the teachers that did not have to work during the summer. But come fall, winter, especially, I was bare minimum doing all the practices. I still did them, but I was bare minimum. So you have to also give yourself the grace too, because if you're doing something and if you're like a Virgo like me and you're like, I've got to do it this way and it has to be like X, Y, and Z and at this time, that took a lot of work too, to allow myself, like if I didn't get to my journaling in the morning, it's okay, Chrissy, you could do it at some other time during the day. You don't have to be so time regimented unless that's your jam, and great, do that. But it's just building the practices for yourself and doing the habits and rituals for yourself when it works for you. But you need to do stuff every single day. Again, not self-care Sundays or once in a while Wednesdays.
Every day. And I think, allowing that space and that flexibility and even letting that be part of your spiritual practice, right, is to take just even that moment to tune in and say, okay, like if I'm having a crazy day, what are the most important like little things I can do for myself today? And
exactly.
Having that, whether it's just, okay, I'm going to close my eyes for 3 minutes, take a few deep breaths, center into my heart center. Maybe that's today's meditation, right? Maybe it doesn't get to be this like long 20-minute thing. But the thing that I found, and I'm sure you relate to this, is that it's often those times when I'm just like, okay, I have 3 minutes between clients. I'm just going to do this like little tapping, or I'm just going to like, tap into my guides, or just like do like a baby little thing that like, then I'm like, ooh, I want to do more and I want to do more. And like, oh, that felt so good. Right. Sometimes even for me, now things are slowing it down a bit and, cause I'm going to go on maternity leave. But when I'm like really back to back with clients, sometimes I'll have like 15, 20 minutes in between and I'll do a lap around the block.
Yes.
It's like one lap. That's all I get time wise. But the one lap gives me sunshine, gives me sanity, gives me movement. Right. And I'll put on like a good song that like also like is like a vibe,
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing with, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. But I want to, before I forget, because I have menopausal brain. You have pregnancy brain, I have menopausal brain. But I'll say it now,
bless us for having this conversation.
But you can, those 5 areas, you can incorporate those areas together. So like, for example, you could go for a walk. There's your movements, physical. Listen to a podcast that's intellectual or spiritual, or listen to, music. And then you're out in nature, again, that's spiritual. And then the movement, that helps with your emotional self too, because as you're moving, you're getting all those, those happy chemicals moving through your body. So, it doesn't have to be an hour long every single day of doing something. It could be, like you said, one lap around and you just hit 3 different things right there, filling up your cup.
Hey guys, Cass here. Are you looking for the clarity, momentum, and intuitive guidance that you need to get your manifestations in motion? Are you listening to Chrissy's story and saying, I wonder what it would be like if I worked with Cass one-on-one? Well, this just might be your lucky day because I am currently onboarding a few new client spots. And if you think that you are destined for one of those spots, I want you to reach out to me. Send us an email at assistant@cassandrabodzak.com or just DM me straight away on Instagram and we'll talk and see if it's the right next move for you. Well, without further ado, let's dive back into the episode.
You have been on such a trajectory and you've kind of lived all these, I feel like, different lives, right? Whether it was,
yes.
like momming and being a kindergarten teacher, and now you're grandmomming and opening your own business and writing your first book, and you see clients, and you have a brick and mortar space that you open where you have workshops and events and all these different things going on. How has your practice my mouth. Okay, it's the wrong tense. The wrong tense is coming out. But what I mean to say is, how have your practices, can you give us like maybe a snapshot of some practices that maybe worked for you during certain seasons that have evolved with you as you've grown? And I think what would also be really curious to hear is, as you've expanded and pushed yourself out of your comfort zone, you know, taken this big leap from, you know, a career that you were comfortable and very good at to this thing that you're really passionate about, but that's kind of like a new frontier, and like really taking a leap to, you know, start your own studio and write your own book and like do all this throughout the years. How do you feel like, what practices do you feel like have supported you the most personally in this, and what does that look like at different stages?
Yeah. So journaling, without a doubt, 100%. That is, if there is anything that I will not give up during the day, it will be my journaling practice. Now, it used to always be in the morning, and sometimes it's not, because now I have 6 a.m. classes, and then I watch my grandsons during the day, and they have evening classes. So I try to do it every single morning. In my journaling practice, I have a gratitude practice where I write 3 things that I'm grateful for every single day that's happened within the last 24 hours. I write a manifestation list of what I'm manifesting, and I break that down. What do I want to manifest in my body? What do I want to manifest in my relationships? What do I want to manifest in my home? What do I want to manifest in my business? And what do I want to manifest in just like an all-encompassed dream? And I just write those all the time. And then I do the 3 pages every single day, and I get out all those kind of emotions. And I know if I like, the only time that I'll skip the journaling is like maybe if I'm on vacation. You know, the first couple of days I'll journal, and then I'll be like, oh, I'm in happy space, so you know, I'm okay. And I'll come home and I'll be like, why am I so freaking grouchy? Like, what's going on? Like, and then I'll go back through my self-care list. Like, what am I doing? I'm not moving my body. And I'm like, oh, I haven't journaled. Like, I'm that self-aware now that I know what it is that I need, that I'm, you know, maybe I push things aside or need to up it up a little bit, like amp it some. So my journaling, 100%. Meditating, and my meditation some days are, like you said, it could be just 3 minutes of deep breath, or I'm just sitting outside. You know, nature is my church, is what I always say. So I'm always outside. So I sit underneath the trees and I listen to the birds, if that's all I have time for. My movement, because I'm in the studio and I'm teaching yoga classes a lot, plus I'm chasing after my almost 3 and almost 2-year-old grandsons all day. Like, I have cardio going all day. So my movement has changed in that way, where I'm not working out every single day. I still have a workout program, but it's not as intense as it was. Plus I'm menopausal, so, you know, less stress, more weights, less stress type of thing. But also, the biggest thing for me in the last couple of years is my social self-care. Because after being locked down in my home, and as much as I enjoyed my family, I realized how much I need community and how much I need people around me. And because I was in that break of coming out of teaching and not having my teacher friends with me all the time, and I'm stuck in the house with my grandsons during the day. And I shouldn't say stuck in the house. I'm in the house with the 2 little ones all day. I'm not around adults talking as much. You know, coming to the studio and having this social life with my students, so much that I actually created a mom circle that we meet once a month, so that we can come together as moms, no matter what age or stage that we're in, so we can have conversation and be around each other. Because I have moms that had their babies during the pandemic, and they were going to their families' houses and holding the baby up at the window. Like, how traumatic is that? Yeah. And they're craving the socialization, their craving, so that has been a big thing for me too. And it's funny to see how through life, you have your childhood friends and your like middle school, high school friends. And if you go to college, you have college friends, or if you're like me, I had my kids young, so I had my mom friends, and as my kids were growing, it was their friends' moms. And then as they grow up, they kind of leave because everybody's life starts to spread, and not that, you couldn't pick up a phone and call each other for an emergency, but you don't see each other every day anymore. It's like that cousin that you love that you never see, and then you're back into this, like, well, where are my friends? Like, what am I doing with my life? So trying to build that social community as well. So that has been huge. So, and therapy. I can't, I can't speak enough about therapy and having somebody to talk to about your issues and your problems that you have. And my spiritual practice, that's been lifelong. I never, I hear people, and I know you've had the story of like a spiritual awakening. I think I was born with a spiritual awakening. I've just had it with me at all times. I've had a relationship with God, and I've had my own practices. Like, I was grounding before I knew grounding was grounding. I was outside with my feet in the grass, like insisting. I would get in trouble for not wearing shoes. I'm like, I have to have my feet in the dirt. I have to have my feet in the dirt. I don't understand why you tell me to put shoes on. I had conversations with spirit. Like, I've always had that around me. And I think I give a lot of my knowing and understanding and acceptance to my grandmother, because she allowed me at a very young age, at like 10, 11 years old, to understand what death meant and what it meant to go to heaven, or to universe, and to cross over, and that it's a peaceful thing, and that they're always there with you. And I carried that my whole entire life with me. And I was also fortunate enough that in middle school, in French class, my French teacher taught us to meditate. I didn't, you're talking in 1980s. We would come into class. She would sit on her desk, crisscross applesauce, because I have to say it like a kindergarten teacher, but she would sit on her desk. She would have us sit on the desk, and she taught us how to meditate, because she told us she wanted us to leave all our crap out in the hallway and come in and be present with her. And, the two things I learned in French class were French fries are not from France, and how to meditate. Don't ask me anything else about French at all. I don't know. You're going to have to teach me, Cass. But I learned to meditate at that age. Wow. And I carried that with me my entire life. So my spiritual practice has always been strong. Always. I've always, even when I went into my yoga teacher training, I was doing all the things that they were talking to me about. And I was like, oh, that's what that's called. I've been doing that my whole life.
I think that's also, for anyone listening, one of the things that can be helpful in gaining momentum is that you might already have some like organic momentum in one of these areas, right? Yes. And build on that. Like, for me, I will say the spiritual and intellectual self-care come way easier than the like movement, physical, and the social, right? They require a little more efforting. So, and like you were saying, similarly with like the spiritual, like that kind of comes to you. So maybe you've already got some momentum in that department, and it's just about making sure like, okay, I just need to make sure I give myself at least like 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever to ground or sit under the tree, right? And like, let that bring you some momentum, right? And I would say sometimes it is starting out with those lower hanging fruit, so to speak, right? Or the things you're like, oh, like I know some of the clients I work with, the exercise portion just comes to them. Like they love running or they love whatever workout they do, right? And so it's like, great. Okay, so let's just build on that, right? How about like after your workout, you cool down and do a little meditation, right? And it's like you can kind of stack what is something that, out of all the ones that you're doing, like how can you, maybe if you're really good at social and you're like good at making sure you connect with people, which I think is that I love that you mentioned that, because I think that's one that we forget about a lot. When we're thinking about self-care, we tend to think about the journaling and the meditation and maybe going in nature, maybe going on a walk, maybe taking a bubble bath, maybe getting a massage, right?
Right.
But we don't also think that, well, one, we need that intellectual stimulation. That is huge for us,
100%.
right? Whether it's a book, whether it's an audiobook, whether it's a podcast, whether it's reading like a substack,
a puzzle
about something.
A puzzle.
Yeah. It could be something
Using your brain.
Using your brain. And then the social, right, is that we do need other people.
Yes.
We need other people. And both the like kind of, you're talking about before being conscious of like toxic people and stuff like that. But I do think that during a lot of seasons of a woman's life, whether it be motherhood, or I myself can speak to like growing and building a business and having a flourishing business, it is so easy if you don't consciously tend to it for your world to get real small, right? Because you're like, I have so many demands. You're not like in your 20s anymore where you're like, who's partying on Friday, right? Like, it's like not, that's not happening. And you have to like consciously be like, oh, is there a women's group at whatever? Or I remember like, even, when I started going to a new Pilates studio, right? Like trying to strike up conversation with women in the class after class, and being like, hey, do you live around here? Like,
Exactly.
And like really trying to start making those like in-person social connections. Especially in this world where it's so easy to like be burnt out from the day and then just stay on TikTok or Instagram all night and not actually engage with other like physical humans in the wild.
We could have a whole nother podcast on that. Oh Lord. Yeah. And it's important too, because whatever season of life that you're in, you need to be around community that can support you and uplift you. So I have a core group of girlfriends that we are on a constant, like, okay, let's set a date for dinner. And if one of us has to cancel, none of us is like, oh, look at her, she canceled. Because we all understand life is lifing, things are happening, but we all put in that effort. But one of the things that I've noticed in the last couple of months is that, for me to have conversation with even some of my closest friends, having this business now, I need people who are doing things like me, who are like-minded, like-hearted, and have conversations to like bounce off. So networking out and trying to, meet for coffee or, get together just to chat, like what's working in your business or what's working in your business, what's not working in your business, those kind of things. It's an effort. And the one thing that I say to people all the time, and it's a hard pill to swallow, is that everything in your life is a habit. And if things are not working out for you, it's your fault, not everybody else's. It's not your husband's fault. It's not your kid's fault. It's not your boss's fault. It is your fault because you're choosing either the mindset to do it or doing the habit and practices that are putting you in that place. You don't have to be around and do the things that society is telling you to do, or, your family member, your friends are telling you to do. You have the God written choice to do what it is that you want to do. If you want to live in misery, you're going to live in misery. If you want to be healthy and happy, you can be healthy and happy. Doesn't mean times aren't going to be hard. And that's why I tell people too, it's self-care. Just because you practice self-care, you're not flying on a unicorn, jumping over a rainbow every day, shooting butterflies out of your butthole. It's not happening. Life happens. Things come at you. But like I said, in you'll read in the book, you have the opportunity to go into your house, which is yourself, shut the doors, shut the closet, shut the windows, shut all the things, work on yourself, take that toolbox out, do all the little things that you have, that you've built in this toolbox to help you get through it, and then be able to walk back out the door. But also, if you practice self-care every day, you can be present and in the moment and have self-awareness and self-appreciation and gratitude for all the things. Because we're not living now. I don't know a single person walking around that's not worrying about what's on the phone or what's on their to-do list or what they had to do yesterday for work that they didn't get done, and the kids need their cleats for soccer and blah, 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 blah. They're not focusing on right now, especially when the big things happen. For me, one of the stories that I like to share with people is when my daughter got married. She was supposed to get married 2020. We got shut down. She had to move her wedding to 2021. All things happen for a reason, divine timing. My mom, the wedding was October 2020. My mom passed October 2020. And for all good reasons, all things happened the way they were supposed to. And then at her wedding, I could have lived in that, oh, my mom's not here. She doesn't get to see my daughter. I could have been upset all day. I could have had, all the feelings, and just been miserable. But instead, what I chose to do was to create a ritual. I brought a picture of my mom and my daughter, and when she was little, and then when they were older, took it down to the beach, got married at the beach, brought my coffee. I sat on the chair by myself, watching the sunrise, had conversation with my mom, and allowed myself to feel all the feelings, because that's another thing with the emotional self-care, is allowing the feelings to come out and not pushing them down. And I just sat there and I was like, Mom, I know you're here and I miss you and I love you and I wish you could be here, but I know you're present. And out of the corner of my eye was an orange butterfly. And this is October of 2021 in, the Jersey Shore. And there's an orange butterfly flying into the sand dune. I was like, oh, hey, Mom. And I was able to just like let it all go, because I created that habit and that ritual to just be there, be present at that moment and let myself feel all those feelings. And then when I went to the wedding, I was like, this is great. Like, my mom would have loved this, and she would have been, so happy. She would love this song. And it's instead of being upset at the time.
Well, it's a powerful example of what you were saying, that, to sum up, like a summary of some of the what you mentioned is like, what you aren't changing, you're actively choosing, right? And that you at any point are the author of your story. And so you have two options in any scenario, right? And having one, I love that you brought up having that daily practice, that self-care practice, that spiritual practice, that grounding practice that brings you into the present moment. I think first and foremost, and I would say this with meditation, but I agree with you, it's valid for all of the areas, but it just allows you to see that you have options, right?
Yes.
It allows you to see that there's not just like the one story, like this has to be a sad day because my mom is not here, right? And my mom should be here. And why is she not here, right? Which no one would blame you for going down that thought trajectory, right? Like, it's human, right. It's totally normal, grieving. But because of your practices, because of your work, because of your awareness, you're able to look at that and say, I have a choice here. Exactly. How do I want to handle it? Do I want to spend the whole day of my daughter's wedding being in grief, being the victim, being, having this story playing in my head about how whatever? Or do I want to acknowledge this is coming up for me? I'm feeling these things. I'm missing my mom. How can I create something beautiful to feel like her presence on this day, right? Which is such a beautiful example of it. But if you can think about that in any context, right? Like, you have the ability to sit there and be like we were talking about before, which I think is common. I help a lot of women as they're like transitioning into owning their own business and doing their own thing. And it's so normal and natural. I relate to this during my journey as well, that like when you first start your own business and you're starting to do this thing or whatnot, oftentimes you don't have the network and you don't have colleagues, you don't have friends that are doing it. We usually feel like lone rangers out there, kind of like rogue on the people that are around us. And so you have that choice to say, I'm not supported. I'm just not lucky like some people that happen to have all these entrepreneurial people around me, or I could have had, better connections or whatever it is. and like be in the victim mode and blame whatever it is, your unhappiness or your business struggling or whatever is going on, because you just don't happen to be blessed to have organically ran into all these people doing the same thing you're doing yet.
Right.
Or you could say, hey, where are people? Where are the people that are doing the similar things that I'm doing? Oh, hey, I'm going to be, showing off my pottery at the farmer's market this weekend. Let me make friends with some of the other vendors, right?
Exactly.
Oh, let me like take a walk down to, this shop that's somewhat related to whatever and introduce myself, right? Let me join a Facebook group. Like in all scenarios, we, by doing these little acts of self-care, of filling up our cup, they're also little ways that we take our power back.
Exactly.
Right? And we take the narrative back. Like even in that, like, I wasn't thinking about it when I shared it, but even in the example of, like I'm saying, like when I have a busy day and I just do my one lap around the block in between every client, right? Be so easy. Nobody would fault me for saying, well, I only had 15 minutes between client sessions, so I didn't get outside today. Right? Like no one's going to come after me and be like, that's a lie. You should have just pushed it. Right? Right. But like, but how empowering is it to decide the story, right?
Exactly.
To decide like, guess what? I'm a badass because even though I only had 15 minutes, I did a lap because it made me happy. I like my sunshine. Right. And, and how all that, like when we take those actions, it really builds up. Oh my God, so much. It's already going over. I could talk to you about like 7 hours. So tell us how, for people, where can they find you? Share a little bit about where you are locally in case anyone's listening that is local and can come in and enjoy you in the flesh, but also for anybody out in the world that wants to work with you or receive your teachings virtually. Tell us all about it. And I'll put all the links below for you guys listening.
Thank you. So the brick and mortar at Healthy and Happy You is located in Pennington, New Jersey. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Healthy and Happy You. And if you want to work with me online, you can reach out and email me at chrissy@healthyandhappyu.com. And you can always go to the website. It has all our offerings, all that we're doing here in the studio. And that's at www.healthyandhappyu.com.
And what's the official title of the book?
Oh, What About Me? So that should be mid-summer, late summer coming out. So yeah, I'm super excited about that. It's all the things that we've been talking about encompassed inside the book. I share stories about my own path and self-care. And I also have a little guide in the back for you to be able to create a self-care practice for yourself, a daily self-care practice. So you're not muttering the words, what about me?
I love it. I love it. And I will put all the links below. So if the pre-order link or the order link is available for the book, I'll put it below. If not, check out her website, get on her newsletter, because then you'll get emailed as soon as the book is available.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being on, Chrissy. It's always
a
pleasure.
Yes. I can't wait to see the